Hey there, and thank you for joining me on Project Loving Myself, where we don't just talk about healing and growth. We call out the messy, complicated, and sometimes what the moments of life. And we figure out how to deal with it all together. Now, on this episode, we're tackling grief, past relationships, and this whole myth of moving on. I mean, how many times have you been told, just get over it? Like you can snap your fingers and erase years of emotional baggage. Yeah, not how it works. Real healing is messy, non-linear, and sometimes feels like a full-time job. But here's the thing. You don't have to forget your past to move forward. You just need to make your peace with it. Joining us on our episode today is Dr. Michelle Peticola, international best-selling author of Step Into Your Brilliance and award-winning filmmaker of Secrets of Life and Death. As a life transformation coach, she's got us covered when it comes to turning heartbreak into powerful life lessons. Lessons that guide us through the healing process, shift our mindset, and reconnect us with our true purpose. We'll be talking about how to stop ghosting your own emotions, why unfinished business is actually a good thing, and how to finally stop stalking your ex's Instagram. I see you, no judgment here. If you've ever found yourself stuck in an emotional loop with a past relationship, this episode is your permission slip to break free. So grab a cup of tea, coffee, or let's be real, wine, and let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Michelle.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be on your podcast.
Well, thank you for being with us, Dr. Michelle. I'm sure this is going to be so helpful for so many people struggling with some of these topics that we have decided to talk about today. So I'm going to jump right into it. Dr. Michelle, let's set the record straight. Why is just move on one of the worst pieces of advice ever when it comes to healing from a past relationship?
Well, the problem is that oftentimes the problem that we're having right in this moment has a long history. And so the typical ways in which we're taught how to get over something may not work, that there may be necessary deeper work that is going to heal all of it. So that's actually the opportunity is if you're dealing with a grief right now and you're having trouble moving forward or dealing with it, is that's an indication that maybe there's something more complex going on and an opportunity to heal all of them. Because a lot of what's going on in our lives is stuff that's happened early on in our lives, and it reverberates throughout in all of our relationships and all of our behavior.
So, being honest about it, right, Dr. Michelle, why is it so hard for people to let go of past relationship? Is it attachment? Is it fear or just plain stubbornness? And I know you talked a little bit about, it's things that are from the past, but at this point in our life, don't we have a choice about moving on or staying stuck? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, you have a choice, but you also need to have the tools to know how to deal with it. And so, first, I'm going to talk about the past and about grief in general, which is almost always about relationships.
Mhm.
When we lose somebody, when we lose a job, when a marriage breaks up, when we move out of our hometown and move somewhere else, it's all about relationships. Because as human beings, we're social species. We're literally wired to bond with each other. And so when that bond is severed, when it's broken, it triggers grief.
Yeah.
That is the emotional reaction to a breaking of a bond. And it's very similar to medically, or not medically, but chemically, to the fight, flee, freeze response that we have when our bodies are threatened. And in
Mhm.
many cases, when we lose a relationship, it is feels life threatening. It feels life threatening. And so there are all these reactions that we have. And until we deal and well, first we need to allow the emotions because that's been triggered by the loss chemicals are released in our body. And if we tamp it down, if we ignore it, if we don't experience and release that emotion, then it gets stuck in our body and we carry
Mm.
it for years and years and years. And the programming that's involved with that will keep on popping up and kind of biting us in the butt.
Can you give us an example of that, Dr. Michelle? Like, if we haven't really dealt with the grief of some kind of loss, whether that's physical or an emotional or even, something that we were hoping for, right? If we don't deal with that, we don't allow the emotions to surface up, we don't confront it, we just kind of, do what most people do, which is hide it under the rug of their subconscious mind. How does it pop up? Can you give us some examples or anything you have seen with your clients?
Well, of course, something triggers it, something that reminds us of the past experience. And oftentimes, a reaction to that, it could be something that somebody said or a way that makes you feel diminished or unimportant or not worthy, that can trigger the response. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own story so that you understand. I really come from this experience. I had an experience of abandonment. And a lot of the problems that people have around relationships has to do with abandonment. And it can
Yeah.
be physical abandonment or it can be emotional abandonment. In my case, it was a little of each. And I say a little because when you were an infant, I was 2 years old. When you're at that age, a little abandonment can go a long way. So, my father, who is the person that I bonded with, my mother was immature, young, and she already had two children. She didn't have the bandwidth for a third child. So, my father bonded with me. And then, because he was in the US Army, he was transferred to Japan. And I was devastated. And I only know about this because of the family stories, because I don't remember, 2 years
Mhm.
old. But the impact is huge. In fact, there was a study done by the London Journal of Pediatric Care on children that were not given affectionate attention, like in orphanages, and had a huge impact on their emotional and mental development. Because as children, we are so vulnerable. And so if we lose the person that we're bonded to, it is like you're afraid you're going to die. And what I decided was that I would tamp down my emotions because they weren't doing me any good. And eventually, you get dehydrated and it doesn't. So learned that. And then I decided that the way to be loved was to figure out what other people wanted and to give it to them.
Mm.
And it worked really, really well for a long, long time, all the way into my adulthood. Through school, teachers loved me because I knew exactly what they wanted and I gave it to them. My
So that
parents, too.
that would Dr. Michelle, would you say so that was the people pleaser that
Yes,
developed in you?
yes, yes. And so I was always seeking love outside of myself.
Mhm.
And as long as you're seeking love outside of yourself, you're giving all your power away. And I didn't realize that for a long, long time because it worked. And when it didn't work, I kept on making adjustments. And so this is some of the problems with when later in life you experience like a marital breakup. There's that whole self-worth that comes up. And it's huge and it has a huge impact. And then you feel like you have to do something. You have to fix yourself.
Mhm.
And there is nothing to fix. I mean, there is healing to be done, but there's nothing to fix.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that I do is with my clients is help them to release the emotions that were held down, to release emotions that are happening right now. And here's the really good news. If you do it the right way, if you really allow your emotions to release, you can release them in 2 minutes or less. Most people are afraid of their emotions because they're afraid they're going to get swamped. They're afraid that they're going to be caught up in it and that they will never get out and they will be stuck forever. But it's not true. But you have to know how to release them. And oftentimes the way in which we do grief groups is counterproductive because it encourages people to tell their stories. And every time you tell your story of your loss, you're re triggering the grief because the mind, the body doesn't know the difference between the story you're telling and the actual event.
Right. So then what do we do, Dr. Michelle, if we are not, if we are not doing right by ourselves by just re-triggering the event over and over again, what should we be doing so that we can release the grief? And you mentioned that it could, we could release our emotions in very quick amount of time. I think you said a couple of minutes or
Yes,
seconds.
well,
Yeah.
2
Tell us
minutes
about
or
that.
less.
Yeah.
It has to do with, the work I do, which is to get you inside your body. It's sort of an internal focus. And,
Mhm.
some people don't you have to I have to train them to do that because they've never done that before. They're so outward focused. But when you go into your body and you start to feel inside, I mean, we actually have that capacity. I don't know that all animals do, but we have that capacity to feel inside. Okay, where am I feeling blocked in my body? And going to that place, because the place where you're blocked is where a lot of information is about what's going on. So if
Okay.
it's in your throat, it may have something to do with you not being able to speak your truth. If it's in the heart, there may be early childhood loss of feeling not loved or not getting enough love or giving away all your love. If it's in the solar plexus, it's has to do with standing up for yourself and living your purpose. If it's the sacral area, the uterus area, it has to do with creativity. Have you been allowing yourself to fully express yourself creatively as a human being? And then down into the base chakra, it has to do with feeling safe. And so where is the pain? Where then the going into the pain and actually focusing on it, sometimes just focusing on that area. And it doesn't necessarily have to be sharp, fierce pain. It could just be a dull ache, or it could be feel like tension. And you focus on that area and you say to, because this is your body, right? This is actually separate from who you really are. You focus on your body and you say, hey, I'm listening to you. I hear you. I'm going to pay attention. I'm sending you love right now. What do you need to tell me? What do
Mhm.
you need to say to me right now? And that's the way in which I help my clients to hear themselves because it's an inside job. We need to hear ourselves, not hear all the stuff out here or all the programming that we have in our brain, but the body. And the body knows the score, the body knows the truth. So you listen. And sometimes it's not ready to tell us, or maybe we think that, it's going to type it out on a computer. No, it may give us an image, it may remind us of a piece of music or a poem, or it can be all different ways that the body communicates because the body is very symbolic.
I think it sounds like such a beautiful practice and process, Dr. Michelle. Now, when I well, let me just correct that. Like one of the things that I love to do is yoga. And I've been doing yoga for quite a while. And I remember, years ago, I started to hear yoga instructors talk about dropping into the body, how we need to drop into the body. And one of the things I loved about yoga is it really is a practice that's all about the body and being present in it. And I feel like a lot of what you're saying is the similar thing is that we are so disconnected in our daily life from what's happening in our body, and practices like yoga as well as other practices that we can do can help us reconnect with what's going on inside. And for me, that last 10, 15 minutes of a yoga session is where I really just am in my body, in my space, and I'm listening to what my body is telling me. So when you were talking about that, I said, yeah, we go to classes to do that when we really should be just sitting down, whether that's in quiet space, meditation, before we go to bed or when we wake up in the morning, we should be taking these opportunities to drop into our body, to listen, to communicate.
But
But
it's
I
a habit.
Mhm.
You have to
Mhm.
learn how to stay in the moment of what's going on in your body. And this brain is trying to talk all the time and talk over and take you away from that. So it's a vigorous practice of consciousness, of mindfulness is I guess what the Buddhists talk about, the mindfulness. And my spiritual teacher talks about being in the moment. And it takes practice. You need to train your brain, and you need to train your body to let go of those thoughts, because it's really, you were talking about how it's hard to let go. It's hard to let go because of this brain, because it's the one that's constantly stirring things up until we learn to master that intellect, that mind.
So that's something I wanted to ask about, Dr. Michelle, is some people feel that there are wounds that will never heal. Like it's just so big or it's so painful, and this is something that they'll never be able to overcome. Is there a small but powerful step or thing that they can do to help them start the process of releasing, or um, something they can do that gives them the hope that it is possible to work through a major wound or trauma that requires them to let go?
It goes back again to those emotions and being willing, and working on the thoughts around the emotions, because if you feel shame or you feel that it's negative, it's going to be hard to allow those emotions. I want to tell you a story. I had a client, he was from the Philippines, and he was married, had been married to his wife for many years, and she died of some horrible illness, cancer, I'm sure. And he said that every time he would hear a radio story or something that reminded him of his wife, he would get back into that grief. And he was very disturbed and upset and disappointed in himself. And I said, why don't you think of it in a different way? Think of it as every time that emotion is invoked by your hearing the radio, that it
Mhm.
is a sign of the immensity of your love for your wife, so that you can cherish those feelings instead of feeling like they're bad, that it's actually good. Allow that feeling. It totally changed, like just that little one adjustment in his thought process. And he was gone from the group in less than a month, because that gave him permission to be where he is right here, right now, and
Yeah.
to interpret it in a way that was healing for him.
Yeah. When I've had to deal with grief myself, I lost my husband's grandfather, who I was very close to during the pandemic. One of the things that really helped me was honoring and celebrating the life of who I lost. And so it was turning the grief into some form of celebration or power, something that encouraged me to always, value every moment I have with the people that I love. So losing my husband's grandfather reminded me how important every moment with my child, with my children, my 3 children are.
Mm, mm.
So I've noticed that when we take a powerful, positive lesson from that person's life, or we find a way to honor or celebrate that life, it has really helped me and also helped a lot of clients that I've worked with when it comes to grief. Is that something that you've seen has worked for some of the people you've coached or counseled? Any thoughts about that?
Oh, well, so many thoughts about that, because it's very important to honor the experience and also to learn. So I just wrote an email to a group of followers I have for this spiritual work I do, and I wrote about this poem by this Sufi poet Rumi. I don't know if
Of
you've ever
course.
heard of Rumi. Okay,
One
right.
of my favorites. One of
Okay,
my
so Rumi wrote this poem called "The Guest House," and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but
It's
he
beautiful.
he
I
talks
know
at
that
the end,
one.
invite
Yeah.
everybody in, whatever, whether they're making a mess in your house or whatever, invite them in, because each guest is is a communication from the other side. It's divine. So every trouble, every trial is something to learn. So when we take the grief and we say, "Oh, what can I learn from this? What message does this have for me?" And all the clients I've ever worked with, there's always something. There's something that helps them. That's where the hope comes from. Is that it provides, when you shift your perspective from being miserable to saying, "Oh, what was I supposed to learn from this? What can I gain from this? How can I move forward with this?" Then you change the story. But there are all kinds of other processes I use. So for one of the things, I was thinking about what you were talking about, doing some sort of celebration. I have a thing about creativity. We're human beings are creative creatures. We need to create. And if you can do something bold and honoring the person you lost, that can be a very powerful healing experience.
Yeah.
So I can give you some examples. There was one woman whose husband had offhandedly said, "Oh, if I ever die, put my ashes on the top of," oh, now I can't remember, some mountain. And she literally trained herself for a year to be able to take his ashes to, I guess it was called Half Dome. And she took them up there. Another woman who was in my film on grieving. Yes, she was on the film on grieving. Her husband was dying of lung cancer. He would go out to this beach, Muir Beach, on the Pacific Ocean, and he would always try. He would go swimming, and he would always invite her in, and she'd say, "No, it's too cold in the Pacific Ocean." But when he died, she found out that the crematorium, the place where they were going to do his ashes, was near Muir Beach. She said, "I'm going in the water."
Wow.
And it was late in the evening, afternoon, and it was cold, and most of the people were gone. And her friends were all saying, "Oh, it's just the idea, the thought that counts. You don't have to really do it." No, she stripped her clothing and she went in, and she said it was cosmic. She felt
Yeah.
him, she felt the universe, she felt this all empowering love. And it was
Amazing.
very healing for her.
Amazing. When we lost my husband's grandfather, two very interesting things that connect to what you said. So my husband's grandfather was someone who really believed in giving back to people, and even up until the age of like 93, every Thursday he would go to orphanages or areas where people lived with very little means, and
Mm,
he would share food, he would distribute food and toys for the children and clothing and blanket. It was something he did every week,
wow.
that he was alive. He was really a spectacular man. And my husband, when he was working through his grief, I reminded him that that was something that was very special to his grandfather. And my husband himself had, I think it was, growing up around his grandfather, he had those influences as well, but he always wanted to open a school for children, for street children.
Ah,
And he always said, I want to have my own foundation supporting children and so on. And I said, this is your opportunity, right? To take the grief and put it towards some kind of act of service that can
yes.
honor your grandfather. And that is exactly what he did. And
Awesome.
also his aunt, so the daughter of my husband's grandfather, his daughter now goes every week to do, or I don't know if she does it every week, but she does it very often to do the same kind of service that her father was doing. The charity, the food distribution and toys, and she does that, and she sends pictures to our group chat, our family chat all the time. And so it's like she's taken it on in a way to honor his memory, and I know to deal with her grief because it was something that was a really really big challenge for her, losing someone she was so close to.
Sure.
And of course, everybody has their own way of honoring the memory or dealing with the grief. But those two examples really stick out because they really bring to life exactly what we're talking about. Now, Dr. Michelle, how about when we are grieving past relationships? Like you've been in a relationship with someone else or a marriage, and we're talking about moving on or moving forward. So, what is the difference between those two things? And what can really help in those kinds of situations? Because, I feel like more and more people are breaking up than staying together. And so, how we grieve and heal and move on or move forward becomes so much more important because it impacts the future relationships we will
Yes,
or will not create with other people. So, can we talk about that a
absolutely.
little bit?
Yes, and I will. And I did have an experience of that too. I had a first husband who who left me for another woman, and at the time, I thought it was my fault because when you're the people pleaser, you figure that somehow you weren't pleasing enough, and you do have to heal that before you can go on to the next relationship. But I didn't have any of those tools back then. So I actually, that's when I went off to a spiritual community and spent a lot of time learning how to open my heart up. But that's not necessarily the way in which you want to do it. What you want to do is, well, one of the things I had to do was break the cord. There was this imaginary thing where you imagine that there's this line, this cord of connection between you and the person that you were involved with. And you can imagine scissors in your hand and cutting that cord. And that's energetically is very powerful to do that. But you want to be prepared to do that. Oh, so yes, there's a thing, a sequence that I use, which is the regrets and the resentments. You want to go through all of your regrets of what you did not do or did not do well in the relationship, and your resentments, what your partner did or did not do well, so that you get it all out, all completely out, so that there's nothing left to be said. And then you go to the acknowledgments, what they did do well and what you appreciate about them. And then finally, you go to your appreciation for yourself. What did you do that was really good? So those are the four things you want to run through all those, write it out in a journal, put it down, get it out, because as long as that stuff is running around, it's going to loop over and over again, and it will retrigger the emotions of grief.
So, what I'm getting from you, Dr. Michelle, is get get it out. Like just get everything out without repeating the same story and feeling everything all over again. Like it doesn't work with grief. With grief, you literally just have to get it all out, put it down on paper, or share it with someone who's your coach or mentor or healer. But the goal is to get as much of it out so it's done. Am I understanding this
Yeah,
right?
you are understanding it right, and when you think about it physiologically, that there's literally chemicals in your body that are stuck in your cells, because when you hold your emotions in, you're contracting your muscles to hold the emotions down, and when you do that, you are literally blocking the flow of energy, the flow of fluids in your body, and you could actually end up with disease if you do that for years and years and years, which people do.
Yeah. They always say, right? When one spouse dies, especially with older couples, the second one seems to follow within a year, year and a half. And there's actually some study
Yeah.
that statistically correlates the death of, one spouse with another as being more than significant because
Yes.
And it connects to something another point I wanted to make. My spiritual teacher, mentor, she said that it's not just the emotional loss, but there's a physical loss because our cells, our body is used to connecting with a person. And if the relationship has, you know, broken, you've gone different ways, or even if there's betrayal, right? The body still wants to connect to that person's energy because there are memories of when that felt good or when that felt supportive, or you needed that connection. And so when we're breaking off a relationship, yes, we get it that it's over and we need to move on, but our body takes some time
It does.
to process, right? The
It
connection
does.
is broken. The
Yes.
energy connection too is broken.
Oh, well, what I like to try and tell some people, I wrote in one of my blogs, is that when you lose somebody, it really messes with the neural nets in your brain, because
Mhm.
here you have these little neural nets running down their little pathway, and they come to like the dinner table or the kitchen or the living room, and suddenly there's this big black hole.
Yeah.
That person isn't there anymore,
The
and
empty chair.
the empty chair, yes. Too much food in the refrigerator, whatever can trigger that feeling of it's like hard to comprehend. And it takes time for the brain to develop new neural networks, to
Yeah.
circumvent that black hole, to create new spaces. I used to talk about pockets of pain. There are places where you might not want to go because it evokes emotion, right? Because it reminds you of something. But if you go to that place when you're ready and you create a new memory, then you're actually releasing that particular pocket of pain, so now you have reclaimed that space. I remember I went for a hike one time, and my first husband and I used to hike a lot, and the emotions, I mean, it'd been years. It was like probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years since we had broken up. And the emotions all came up. But I had a new memory now, and I let it go.
That makes so much sense, Dr. Michelle, that, these pockets of pain, that's what we need to look out for and just acknowledge that they exist and then let them go. Now, is there a mindset shift, Dr. Michelle, that seems to help your clients that you can share with us?
Yes. Well, there are a number of mindset shifts. One is that if it was a relationship that you wanted to hold on to, and you value that person very much, is that you reclaim the essence of that relationship as something that you can have without them. For example, maybe they were uh, love. Well, you can reclaim that love and throw it into your future. So there's um, exercise that you can do that will reclaim all the things that you related to that person, so that now it's not stuck on that person. Oh, I will never have any love again. Oh, I will never have somebody that has good conversations with me, or blah blah blah. But that you can take that back for yourself without having to have all those features, those characteristics, as being attached to that one person. And also you have to believe that you're going to meet somebody even better.
Yeah. But that's always something that does come with time and confidence and some of that work that
That
becomes
all that
so
work, right.
important.
And that's why if you have abandonment issues, you want to work on those, because you don't want because you're going to just carry that baggage with you if you don't work
Right.
on it. I mean, my husband, my first husband, he was like so unlikely to abandon me because he was so attached. We were so codependent, and yet there was that little seed, that whole belief system in my head about being abandoned, and it was just a through line.
Do you think that focusing on what it is that is within us that creates the breakup or the separation, right? And just taking ownership of that is a good way to process the grief and the healing, to kind of redirect or refocus our attention on, well, how did I get here? What is it within
Yes,
me that seems to have invited this
yes,
experience?
yes,
That's something, that is
yeah,
a process that I use with a lot of my clients, is that,
yes,
wait, instead of focusing on what you lost, let's
right,
look at what you can gain from
right,
this, which
right.
is the opportunity to recognize how you've been contributing to this pattern or this situation in your life.
Absolutely. It's re-empowerment. And
Yeah.
if you've had that experience of abandonment, and that's something to look at, is what are your experiences of abandonment? Do you feel abandoned this time, whether it's through death or through divorce? If you feel abandoned, then there's probably something in your history that makes you prone to that abandonment, and you want to work on that, and you want to change the story. So part of the process I have with people who work with me is to literally rewrite their life story
Yeah.
up to where they are now, so that they see this loss as just one of the chapters in their life history rather than the end.
Yeah.
And they actually have to start to vision what's the next chapter.
I think if I were to summarize one of the key highlights of our conversation today, Dr. Michelle, it's really understanding that having abandonment issues often can show up as situations where you do have to deal with grief and loss more than the average person who doesn't have that issue,
Yes, yes.
right? You're more likely, like if you have abandonment issues, you're more likely to experience abandonment in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, yes, it's some way in which, well, the law of attraction, if you expect
Correct.
abandonment, you're gonna attract it, right?
Yeah,
And
but most people aren't aware, right, that
right,
they have
right,
this abandonment program or that
right.
they're expecting the abandonment. It's just happening on such a deeper level. But
Yes,
what they could do is look for the pattern in their life. Is this
yes,
something that comes up maybe in smaller moments, maybe in conflicts and little fights that they have with their partner? Like if you are experiencing abandonment repeatedly in your life, right? Whether that's
right,
at work, in your relationship, in your friendships, that might be a really big red flag that tells you, I probably want to get in front of this and I probably want to work out my abandonment issues before I have to then deal with the grief and the loss part of it, which makes it so much more difficult because now you've got abandonment and grief and loss, and that's so much more to have to deal with. So if you are listening in and you do feel like abandonment is something that features kind of prominently in your life, this conversation is an invitation to maybe take a look at that and make sure that you clear these issues, let it go, and heal from it before it comes back as these bigger challenges of loss, of grief, of having to move on, maybe not once, but repeatedly in your life. I love that, I could pull this really important piece, Dr. Michelle, from our conversation, which I think is going to help so many people out there if they knew about this. Now, tell me, Dr. Michelle, if someone is feeling stuck, they want to move forward or move on, they don't know how, what is the first step for them?
well, they could take my complex grief checklist
Okay.
form. They could find out whether or not they have complex grief. That would help them to understand whether there is that issue of early childhood that's holding them back from being able to move forward. And then when they do that, not only do I give them an assessment to tell them how to interpret that, but they also get a series of emails that give them specific instructions about things,
And
practices
what
that they can use.
and what is complex grief? Like how would you define that so people
So,
can understand?
sure. So, complex grief is when the current grief you have is magnified, amplified by unresolved grief in your past. And almost all my clients have that. And it's amazing. I don't know if I have time for one more story, but there was one client who came to me. She had been grieving the loss of her husband for 20 years. I mean,
Mm.
tears rolling down her cheeks. And it was a problem for her because her adult son looked like her husband. And every
Oh,
time she saw him, she would cry, which was kind of making their relationship a little difficult. So she has seen all kinds of psychiatrists and everything. And she came to me, and it turned out that in her past there were there were several abandonments, and she was on her way to her fourth. The first one was that her father left her mother because her mother was a bit of a party girl and was unfaithful, so he left. So that was the first abandonment, was the father. Then she was being brought up by her grandmother, and her grandmother died, so that was the second abandonment. And then she grows up, she marries the man of her dreams, and she adores him, and he solves all of her problems, maybe too many problems. He dies. So that was abandonment 3. And if she wasn't going to deal with it, she was going to lose her son as well. He was going to hold her. So that's when, but God, it's like it just kept on repeating and repeating. And the ultimate lesson is that she had to learn to love herself, that it isn't out there, it isn't somebody else. When you can love yourself, then you exude love and you can attract the people who can love you.
what a beautiful story. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Michelle. Now, the last question I ask every guest before we wrap up the episode is, what is your Project Loving Myself message or mantra that you would like to share with those who are listening in? I almost think you've given that to us, but
I
if you have
have, but I'm
something
going to give you something that'll help you remember it. So
beautiful,
I'm
beautiful,
going to
go
date
ahead.
myself. There is a song by the Beatles called "And in the End," and it says, "The love you take is equal to the love you make." So it's about you're making your love, and that's what you receive.
Wow, I love it. I call it like the energetic equivalent principle that we give and we receive. It's all a reflection. But I love how you said that. And I love that it connects to, the wisdom of the Beatles, who I
The great gurus of the
uh,
60s.
for sure. That was such a great example to give. But I want to thank you, Dr. Michelle, for all that you have shared with us. I know that grief and letting go, moving on, I mean, these are really big topics, but I love how you broke it down and made it so much easier for people to even just take a single first step. So thank you so much for that. If people want to reach you, how do they get in touch? And I know you also mentioned the free gift, which will be linked in the episode
Right.
description.
So it's really simple. And that's complexgriefchecklist.com. All the words smushed together, complex grief checklist. And that will get you started. And it will get you a chance to see what's going on for yourself and to give you a taste of the kind of materials that I can provide you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that. Um, Thank you again for your time and your energy.
Thank you for asking me on your show. I really enjoyed it.
Beautiful. Okay, so that's great for our recording. I just need one thing for you, Dr. Michelle, which is I do like a short spiel recording for the social media release.
Okay.
So, can I just drop it into the chat if you don't mind? And if we can just record you on the
Okay.
main stage doing that. Hold on, I'm going to drop it in right now. So this is the format. It's just like, hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Peticola, and I will be on Project Loving Myself with Sanaya to talk about, and then however you want to describe our
Mhm.
conversation today. Okay. And you can just kind of go straight into it. I'm going to put you on the main stage and it's rolling. So if you need to do it as many times as you want, go ahead.
Okay.
but at least a minimum of 2 times just so we have
I
versions.
would like to have this. Let me see if I can copy this and put it on a piece of text. Hold on. Okay, because I want to be looking at the screen here. Okay, are we ready? Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Pedicola, and I will be on Project Loving Myself with Sunaya to talk about the topic of past relationships and how to get over them so that you can go on living and loving yourself.
Perfect. Do you wanna go one more time so we have a backup?
Sure. And do you want me to say more than that? Or
No,
is
that
that
was
good?
perfect. That was perfect.
Okay. Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Pedicola, and I will be on Project Loving Myself with Sunaya to talk about the topic of past relationships, how they can hold us back, how to heal, to move forward, and love life and yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dr. Michelle. I will let you know. You'll get an email once the episode releases, and we'll tag you on everything.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure to meet you. And gosh, you're more gorgeous than you even look in all your photographs. You
Well,
are
thank
just
you.
amazing. And as I said, I just love your podcast. You are awesome.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your encouragement, and I appreciate your time for coming on here to chat with me. Thank you.
No problem. No problem. Thank you so much. You have a great rest of your day.
Yep. See you later.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, I'm just going to do the outro recording. Let me just double check if it works. Okay. Ready. And that's a wrap on today's episode with Dr. Michelle Peticola. Didn't this conversation give you some great tips on how to move forward in the best possible way? I also love how we brought it all back to abandonment issues, which is something I see with so many people that I coach. We've learned that moving on doesn't mean deleting your past, it means giving it a new job as your teacher. Now, if something in this episode struck a chord and deep, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend who needs a little push to finally block the ex and to move on. You know the one. Make sure to follow at Michelle Peticola on Instagram, and you can check out her website tagged in the episode description. Trust me, you'll want to if you're dealing with these kinds of issues of grief and loss and moving forward. You're not defined by the relationships that didn't work out. You are strong, you are resilient, and you've got every. Okay, I'm going to redo this whole thing. Hold on. Sorry, guys. Okay. And that's a wrap for our episode with Dr. Michelle Peticola. Didn't this conversation give you some great tips on how to move forward in the best way possible? I also love how we brought it all back to abandonment issues, which is something that I see with so many people that I coach. We learned that moving on doesn't mean deleting your past, it means giving it a new job as your teacher. Now, if something in this episode struck a chord, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a friend who needs a little push to finally block that ex. You know the one. Make sure you follow at Michelle Peticola on Instagram, and you can check out her website tagged in the episode description. In quotes today, you can't reach what in quotes today, you can't reach what's in front of you until you let go of what's behind you. So remember, you are not defined by the relationships that didn't work out. You are strong, you are resilient, and you've got everything you need to build a life that makes you excited to wake up to it every single day. Until next time, keep loving yourself through the ups, downs, and every twist in between. You've got this, and I'm cheering you right on. You are loved. Okay, I'm going to do the intro again one more time. Hey there. Thank you for joining me on Project Loving Myself, where we don't just talk about healing and growth. We call out the messy, complicated, and sometimes what the moments of life. And we figure out how to deal with them together. Now, in this episode, we're tackling tough subjects like grief, past relationships, and this whole myth of moving on. I mean, how many times have you been told, just get over it? Like you can snap your fingers and erase years of emotional baggage. Yeah, not how it works. Real healing is messy, nonlinear, and sometimes can even feel like a full time job. But here's the thing, you don't have to forget your past to move forward. You just need to make your peace with it. Joining us today is Dr. Michelle Peticola, international best-selling author of Step Into Your Brilliance, an award-winning filmmaker of Secrets of Life and Death. As a life transformation coach, she's got us covered when it comes to turning heartbreak into powerful life lessons. Lessons that can guide us through the healing process, shift our mindset, and reconnect us with who we are. We'll be talking about how to stop ghosting your own emotions, why unfinished business is actually a good thing, and how to finally stop stalking your ex's Instagram. Eyes see you, no judgment. If you ever found yourself stuck in an emotional loop with a past relationship, this episode is your permission slip to break free. So grab a cup of tea, coffee, or let's be real, a glass of wine, and let's get into it. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Michelle. All right, you guys, I think that was the better intro. And thank you.